Truth in This Art. I am your host, the Big Easy Rob Lee. I've been saying it all week. I'm not gonna lie. And we're here today, and I'm super excited to welcome the owner of Baldwin Co in New Orleans, dope bookstore. It's not just an independence bookstore, but it's also a coffee shop that offers high quality coffee, tea, pastries, and the store stocks books on a wide range of genres, including mystery, business, history, like I said, cut and paste, art, travel, children's literature, and much, much, much more. This space is dedicated to promoting great writing and regularly hosts events with local and visiting authors. The store also offers cards, journals, gifts. It's just a great place to be. So please welcome DJ Johnson. Welcome to the podcast.
Man, thank you, Rob. It's a pleasure to be here. I really do appreciate it, man. Thank you for allowing me to be the host. A guest on your show today.
I mean, you could be the host. I mean, I could just sit here and just play your role.
No. The honor's all mine. I'd rather be the guest.
I appreciate it.
You're much better at this than I am.
Debatable, but thank you for making the time and coming on here and getting to chat with you a little bit beforehand. I think it always adds another dynamic to it, and in doing this conversation in space, like not doing it via Zoom, I think it makes for a richer conversation, because I could just say, here's the questions I got for you, and then it's just like, oh, you got nothing out of it. So I think it's great, and I'm just looking forward to learning more. So as I start off with this sort of like introductory question, right, I find that a lot of the things that we're interested in as adults have some roots when we're kids or very young. Like, those sneakers you couldn't afford, you're like, I'm gonna get those when I'm older. And it's like, that motivates my work. I wear this color palette as a result of those Jordans I couldn't buy. So could you tell us about some of your early creative interests? And like, what books were you into growing up? And I have a second question, but I at least want to start off there about some of those early interests creatively.
The autobiography of Malcolm X, Alex Haley, one of the most profound pieces of literature that I read at an early age. And I only read it because my older brother was reading it.
Sure.
And I wanted to do everything he wanted. Everything he did, I wanted to do. I wanted to be him. And I remember it like yesterday. I'm 12 years old. I'm at the kitchen table and I'm watching him read the book. And it's dinner time and he puts the book down and then walks away. And after dinner, we're by my grandmother's house. I pick up the book and I'm reading it until like 2:00 in the morning.
Yeah.
My grandmother, she comes down the hallway with her slide. She sees the kitchen light on. She sees me in there. She's like, boy, what are you doing? But I was so engulfed in the book. Yeah. Prior to that, of course, I had read children's books, but this is the first like literary book that I read.
Right.
And I just fell in love with it. And then after that, I went on to read Souls of Black Folks by W.B. Du Bois, The Miseducation of the Negro by Carter G. Woodson. My dad just started feeding us books in terms of the content. My dad, he had this rule. He said, look, you're going to read about white folks all day in school. In my house, in this house, you're going to read about black people. You're going to read about your history. So on Mondays, every Monday, we could not watch television. There was no TV.
Yeah.
No matter if you finish your homework or not, you had to read. So like that was my early introduction into developing reading habits.
Yeah.
And then what kept it going is that I grew up with a speech impediment.
Yeah.
So I had to do speech therapy, and part of the speech therapy was like this therapeutic sessions like Toastmasters today.
Yeah.
So I'm having to read and get up and speak about, do an oral book report. And the more I got into these fictional stories, of say Ernest Gaines and The Gathering of Old Men, as I'm reading these stories, I'm falling in love with the characters.
Yeah.
Ernest Gaines is one of my favorite authors growing up.
Yeah.
So as I'm reading these stories, I'm just like, man, this is a pretty cool escape here.
Yeah.
Your mind just takes you on a journey that your imagination has never touched on before, but it becomes addictive.
Yeah.
And it's pretty much does what social media does today. Mm-hmm. It takes you away from your reality. Well, books can do the same thing. And that's what it did for me growing up as an impoverished kid to whereas every day all I saw was impoverishment, drugs, crime, degradation, and impoverishment. That's all I saw.
Right.
But I was able to enter into a new space when I read these books. And then the content of the Souls of Black Folks and Carter G. Woodson and John Henry Clark, Dick Gregory, as I'm reading that put the reality into context.
Yeah. Thank you. I think it's like, it's funny, and I know it's going to be a question we have a little bit later, but when it comes to books, it's what's that old adage? You want to hide something from a Black person, you put it in a book. You know, we don't read or whatever. We don't swim and we don't read. I'm working on the swimming part. The reading part's gotten better because I think I shifted, right? How I view it, and I use technology, even in this process, right? So, you know, when I'm coming up, so when I was younger, I used to be very, very, very embarrassed and very, what's the word? Like, it's like, I don't know if I can be in conversations sometimes because I can't make a reference to a book because I don't retain. You know, I can read, but I don't retain. And I was like, what's my way of retaining? Repetition. It's like learning something. So I use the technology. I grab the audiobooks, and there are some, because I want to have, like, I'm playing with this idea of space, and it's funny, we're in a bookstore ultimately, but, you know, having this sort of idea that, all right, I want to consume the information. I want to be able to get to how do I consume it? What works for me? And when you mentioned autobiography about that, it's like, I definitely got that, and I can make that reference point. I was like, yeah, so in this chapter, right, you know, dancing was a big part of his life, if y'all didn't know that. And I can make that sort of reference. Or even if I'm going through sort of entrepreneurial books or books on how to, like some of the more dated stuff, like, you know, like I listen to a lot of the laws and the 48 laws of power and all of that different stuff. But even like, you know, different things from like Jack Welch books or Jim Rohn and things of that nature, just to understand a certain cohort and in a different perspective. I can get your bio and understand that, but really, how do I get to the thinking in that? So sometimes it maybe takes from a different book to transfer maybe your thinking to a different place. And that sparks questions all the time for me. And, you know, it just opens up my way of thinking. So I think it's so much power. And I like the way you described it of like, it's kind of like social media. You can expose yourself to different things. I like that. So we didn't just get here, right? So talk about your career path. Like, how do we get it here? Because, you know, it's like, yeah, at one point, right, when I was in my first book, and then I just said, here's the bookstore, everything else is in there, we're bringing in coffee next week. So tell me about the career path.
The career path, this was not in my career path. This was not in my 5-year goal, 10-year goals. This was like maybe like 40-year goals, like when I retire and what am I going to do with my life? And I was like, oh, it'd be really cool once I'm retired and old, then own a bookstore and just talk to young folks about books and sit and drink tea all day, coffee. But how it came about was I was an IT manager for the federal government, and my mom ended up getting sick, and the doctor told us that she wasn't going to live very long. So I decided to quit my job, relocate back to New Orleans to take care of my mom. I'm happy to say my mom still is alive. She's alive and well. She does remarkably well.
That's great.
But she didn't recover well enough for me to move back to either Atlanta or Washington, D.C. So I decided to stay here in New Orleans. And as I'm walking around the communities, talking to young folks like, hey, man, why are you doing this? Like, this is destructive behavior. Yeah. You are participating in your own oppression. And I'm walking around and I'm recommending books, and people will say, man, where are you from? I'm like, I'm from here. It was like, man, you kind of talk like you're from here, but you don't use words like you're from here.
I run into the same thing.
So I would talk to them about reading and the power of reading, and I would tell these youth, I was like, man, I know you think you're growing up impoverished, but trust me, your level of impoverished that you're growing up in pales in comparison to the level of impoverishment that I grew up in. Yeah. You know, I was like, we didn't have a refrigerator. We didn't have light for months at a time. You know, we slept in the same beds as my other 5 siblings. We're sleeping horizontal in 2 twin-sized beds. I'm like, you know, that's the level of impoverishment that I grew up, the level of crime that I grew up witnessing. I was like, you're not, trust me, you don't have it as hard as you think you had it. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, books saved my life. Yeah. They can save yours too. Yeah. If you want to come back and buy back the block and regentrify our own communities, and this is how you do it. You do it with the power of a book. And I wanted to be able to be that example, one, for the young black men and young black boys, to show a black man reading and the power that you can gain and utilize from out of the pages of a book. So that's how it all started. It all started as a community give back and being able to do community-based initiatives to help enrich the community, grow the community, educate the community, cultivate creativity, and have an intellectual hub of stimulation and growth within our own community by us.
I love that. I love it. It's great. Like, even, from the standpoint, one, I love coming down here because everyone is just like, hey man, how's it going? I was like, what's up, man? I don't know you spoke to me. And we don't get into Baltimore all the time. And but in coming in, it's in some ways it sounds so corny, but it feels like a warm hug from like a cousin you haven't seen in a while. And as soon as I came, I was like, I'm just gonna go right back to the back versus some of the things that one can run into. Sir, you can't be in here. I was like, nah, I got an appointment. but also it's just like, hey man, go and take a look. This is a place for you. That's what it felt like without even being said. And that's the thing I dug about it. I was like, oh, that's my man DJ right there. We got it. And I think, having a space like that, and I feel like there's another stop within here. I believe there's an art related thing that's in this whole, as we get here, thing. So it feels like, for you having an interest in your community, in the city, specifically with people that look like you and I, and it's like, there's more, right? And I've run into this on more than one occasion. So the thing that you said, like, you sound like us. People say, you don't sound like us. How we know you from Baltimore? It's like, you don't have enough grit on you. I was like, I'm from Lafayette Projects on Orleans Street. See? Very specific. It sounds like a place in Louisiana. And people would ask me, like, why do you have these interests? What are these things? Podcasting, some of the things. And I'm like, you can do this. Why aren't you like looking at this and having like vision? And I think part of it comes from travel, right? I think part of it comes from, sometimes it's being in a different space, but sometimes it might be the things that you're interested in. A book in many ways can be traveling, can be a supplement. So talk about some of the other projects, like, was it NOLA Art Bar?
NOLA Art Bar.
So talk about some of the other projects. Let's talk about this a little bit. Like, how did that one come about as well? And why, was this sort of like, I want to do work that is in these specific areas? Why was that of interest for you?
Well, it's twofold. So the way NOLA Art Bar, the idea came around was I'm walking down the streets of Georgia Street in the art district. And I'm like, hey man, why isn't your art? Why isn't black art? Why isn't street New Orleans art in these studios, in these phenomenal art galleries that we see people walking about in and out of? And he's like, man, there's a lot of politics, and particularly if you're a black male, you're a black artist, particularly a street artist, they deem it a different quality, a lower quality than like fine art. And I started looking at spaces where I started recognizing black art in the city, and it was always in like dark establishments or unpolished establishments. And I was like, you know what? I want to create a space where the local artists can showcase their work in a nice, clean, aesthetically well-lit environment. Yeah. To be able to sell their work, because they do a lot of work on buildings, but you can't sell your work when you paint it on a building. No. You can't paint a mural on a building and then sell those rights.
And, in some ways, and not to take shots at the folks that are in the street art realm, but it's almost a devaluation of it, because it's like it's being given away, and that could help. But when in terms of, let's say, someone making money from that art or getting that sort of next level exposure, it's isolated to people that are going past that space.
Exactly. But that's what attracts people to New Orleans. You see all these tourists, they walk around, they're taking photos and selfies in front of all the great visual murals that we have around the city. They're not going to Jewelry Street, taking a selfie in front of a framed photograph in an art gallery. They're not doing it. Right. The attraction to New Orleans is the authenticity, the reflection of our realities that are painted on these buildings throughout the city. And I said, they should be able to take that piece home with them. And you, as an artist, you should be able to profit from that. Yeah. So that's how the Art Bar came around. And it just happened to have a liquor license. So I was like, you know what, we're going to do art. But we're also going to do the art of craft cocktails. Yeah. So it's a craft cocktail bar. and we make all of our own syrups, we fresh squeeze all our own juices because we also want to showcase the art of drinking. Not just coming down to New Orleans and getting overly intoxicated and overly indulging in alcohol. And then there's another element to it that is symbiotic to what I created with Baldwin and Company.
Yeah,
it's
please.
a place where you can have conversations because I want to promote interpersonal communication to whereas we get together over a cocktail and we have intellectual sparring sessions on how do we solve the greatest issues that exist in society.
We don't do that as much, and so I really appreciate you mentioning that because we don't do nuance anymore. We don't have discourse. It's sort of this is wrong, here's my take, moving on, and nothing really gets solved. It's a lot of people that have takes that they're posturing for, and they're not having an opinion, they're not letting their opinion have them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. So that was the idea. I said, man, you know what? Baldwin and Company is going to be great for the morning and afternoon. It's great to come and have intellectual discussion, but what about the individuals that maybe aren't entrepreneurs that want to engage in this interpersonal communication, these intellectual gymnastics and sparring sessions, but they work and they're not available until after 5, or they don't drink coffee or tea and they really prefer a bar environment. So I say, I want a black space that promotes black intellectual empowerment in the conversations and where they feel safe having these conversations.
Absolutely.
Because a lot of times blacks in white space, when we try to have these conversations, then we lower our voice. In my space, you don't have to lower your voice. Mm-hmm. You can speak as loud as you want because I want to encourage the empowerment of the conversation. We have these conversations regards to social, political equality, healthcare disparities. How do we rebuild our own communities, white flight, gentrification, and it's a beautiful space. So when you walk in, you feel like home, you feel like you're in the living room setting. And it's a setting to where as you engage in some of the highest banter that you will ever have in your life because that's what the space exudes. That's the energy that it gives you. And that's what I want to create it for the morning, the afternoon, and no law bar for the evening time. And you can just discuss it over a cocktail versus Baldwin and Company, which is books, coffee, and tea.
I love that. And, I can't help but mention, and having this delicious drink that I'm enjoying. And my lips are on fire, by the way. So shout out to you on that. But talk about sort of building out the menu between both places because, obviously Baldwin and Company, Baldwin, and a lot of the drinks have these relation to whether it's titles, whether it's references to James Baldwin or what have you, and I believe other artists. I know I've noticed James Baldwin because I'm drinking the If Bill Street Could Talk. So talk about building out like what a menu looks like from that standpoint because we have the vibe. We have a sense of the purpose around it, the why, if you will. Mm-hmm. So talk about like building out like what that menu is going to look like and why within that menu.
So the menu consists of all my own personal recipes. So all of our lattes, you cannot get these lattes anywhere else. They are all my own personal recipes, just from study and dedication and time, trying different flavor profiles. In New Orleans, man, we love to cook. So I grew up cooking, grew up in the kitchen. I love to cook. So I have a really good palate. People, I used to go out in other cities and eat food. And I was like, it's just okay. It's just okay. And people are like, you picky. And I'm like, no, I just know what good food tastes like. I'm from New Orleans. We do food very, very well. I'm sorry. So for me, I have a very refined palate. And I just translated it from cooking gumbo and jambalaya and etouffee to, okay, now it's coffee. Like, how do I introduce unique flavor profiles? So, for instance, we put ashwagandha in a latte. We put the cardamom in another latte. Sure. So, but they also have health benefits, like the ashwagandha helps with de-stressing the body. And we also have a hawthorn berry latte because it helps with your heart production. Yeah. So we have a number of lattes, but they all have a health element to them because we don't want to just enrich your mind with the books, but we want to enrich your body also. So we're not going to invite you in here and we say, hey, get smart, but forget about the health of the body and give you a latte that's filled with nothing but sugar and syrup.
Yeah.
that is going to in turn destroy your internal organs. We're going to say, no. We want you to have a healthy mind and body. So we only use oat milk because it is phenomenal alternative milk. But we also take an environmental approach to it as well. In terms of that, oat milk uses 383% less water than almond milk.
Yeah.
And it's much healthier alternative than cow milk. So one of the reasons that we do it is we say, hey, we want to help the environment.
Sure.
We also want to help you in your mind, in your body. And that's how the menu was designed. To whereas, what are the health components of a latte that we can bring to Baldwin and Company? We have another one that uses bacopa, and it helps with mental stimulation and memory.
Yeah.
So that's how the menu is built out.
I love it because I shrug when I see like any non-cow milk. I must admit I shrug. And I have had instances where I've gotten, I guess, mediocre sort of like oat milk. I don't notice the difference other than I read it. I don't notice the difference. And that's the way it's supposed to be. It's a substitute. Like you don't, especially here, and as a man who has a refined palate such as myself, I just had this conversation with someone. I was like, there's a lot of imitation shrimp and grits up in Baltimore. I don't like it. Get that out of here. No turkey in here. No. Where's my tasso? Like that could go a little longer now. And just, really thinking of unique ways. Like back in Baltimore, I must do a shameless plug. I have an official drink at one of my places.
Nice.
I have a cocktail. It's called the Rob Lee.
Nice.
It's like vermouth, bourbon, and cinnamon syrup. It's a simple cocktail, and people seem to dig it. And I think being able to share sort of that thing, like I like cinnamon. I know it's anti-inflammatory as well. So it's like very passively. Yours is intentional. Me, it's just, look, I look like cinnamon. That's what we're doing. It's something about it of really being able as a black man having the opportunity to, whether it be through the support of peers and all, or being able to do it on your own, be able to, with the support, but in a different way, being able to realize and grow some of these ideas. And I think if it's coming from a place, as you were describing younger, it's like, look, we know who we are. You're going to learn about yourself. You're going to learn about your people and see it kind of manifesting now in some of the work that you're doing, whether at, here, whether at NOLA Art Bar, any of the places. And I think that's important. I think that's very important. So bravo to you on that.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it, man. I want to shout out to a book that I read by Jawanza Kunjufa called Satan, I'm Taking Back My Health. And that really helped put me on the path to making sure that I was living a very healthy life with the products and things that I put in my body.
Yeah. And I notice, like, when one gets down here, like, one indulges, especially, if you haven't had these things regularly, and especially if it's like, we have a version, but this ain't the real thing. And you come there, it's like I haven't been able to get it. Now I just need all of it. And just being very mindful. I haven't had a beignet yet, so just to let you know. I'm a little sad about that, but
go to Loretta's. That's my cousin.
All right. I'll pop over. So let's see. I got pretty much two more real, like, kind of big questions, and I got those rapid fire questions that you got to get. I got to give them to you. So let's see. So let's talk about balancing sort of creativity and practicality within your work. Like, as we were talking a little bit beforehand, practically speaking, I could just do all of these interviews in a certain way, right? I could do them via Zoom. It's easier, bong, 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 and I can knock them out. But I think in terms of the creativity and the richness of the conversation, it requires me to try to connect with the person on a different level. It adds for a richer thing. Like, you can, through Zoom, you can see the video, you can see someone's like facial expressions, but you're like, all right, do I go too long? Do I go longer? Do I cut it off? So tell me how you balance like being very practical while trying to, be creative, serving the community, this is what I'm feeling. And I think you're a superhero in that regard. So tell me about balancing those two, being creative and kind of pushing the boundaries of what your work is about while like being practical.
From a business perspective?
Yes.
It's difficult. It's a fine line to walk because there's so many community-based initiatives that we do that are contrary to good business practices. For instance, within the first 3 months of opening up Baldwin and Company, we held a book festival where we gave away hundreds of free books to every kid that walked in. We gave away free food, free drinks. We also had free entertainment. We did free book readings. This is all within the first 3 months of opening We did 3 more book festivals to follow, giving away a total of 1,062 books for the entire year. Over $100,000 in giveaways we did, and that's from household goods to after Hurricane Ida, we gave away household goods, water, laundry, bleach, cleaning supplies for people to go and clean their homes, clean out the refrigerators. We gave vouchers and gift cards for people to go and purchase other household goods that went bad during Hurricane Ida. So we gave away well over $100,000 in giveaway, and that came from out of the profits of Baldwin and Company.
Wow.
For the community,
Yep.
It's not good business practices.
It's not.
Not for a bookstore that just opened.
And what year was
12 months? This is year 1.
What year did you guys open?
2021.
Oh,
yes.
So also during the pandemic.
Yes.
Well.
Also during the
All
pandemic.
right, go on, continue.
Yes. It's probably not sustainable business.
Who's that knocking at the door?
Yes. Probably not sustainable business practices to give away every dollar you make within the first year. Yeah. Particularly when they say, most businesses fell within the first 3 years.
Sure.
And instead of taking our profits and reinvesting them or just hoarding them, I was giving away every dollar that I made back into the community. So that's the practical balance that is like, hey, this probably isn't practical, but you have to figure out a creative way to engage the community. Mm-hmm. And that's what I wanted to do. I said, how do I engage the community? And that's why we held a festival. Yeah. And it wasn't just a book giveaway. But I was like, no, we're going to provide free concerts. Mm-hmm. We're going to give them all free food. We're going to provide free drinks. And we're going to give every kid that walks in here free books and help register them into our program to where if you read a book and then you go online and submit a book report to us, then we're going to give you another free book. And as many books as you can read and you submit a book report for, that's how many free books we're going to provide to you. So finding creative ways to enrich the community, engage the community, and nourish the community isn't always the most practical business sense, but it's something that I figure we had to figure out a way. We had to be creative and figure out a way how to do it. So I'd say, okay, how do I continue to fund these amazing community-based initiatives that I want to do? Because there's so much more that I want to do. So it's always a process. It's every day just trying to figure out an idea. Like, how do I enrich the community, grow the community, develop it, engage them, but at the same time, be able to pay this light bill?
It's people over profits a lot of times in terms of what the mission looks like. And, not peeling back the onion too far, but like, how does that happen? Like, because as we talked about a little bit beforehand, like, I'm just getting to figuring out that puzzle, and it's work. It's work, and having so many more ideas, and that's where that sort of creativity thing comes in. It's like, how can I do this, but also, I can't be eating asparagus and popcorn now. I need to be able to, because you're not paying yourself in most instances,
Yeah. So, one of the ways for me is we should start a nonprofit. So we just started the Baldwin Co Foundation, 501c3 organization, and we are alive and well in accepting donations because the work that we're doing in the community, we want to continue and we want to scale the impact. And in order to do that, it's not a sustainable business model to continue to take the profits out of Baldwin and Company Coffee and Bookstore. Sure. So we started a nonprofit, applying for grants and applying for other sources of funding in order to be able to scale these community-based initiatives. And that's one of the creative ways that we're going to help bring in sustainable models to continue to do our community work.
I love that. So I got one more real question, and I've been asking this like a lot, and I think whenever I travel to a new place, I think it's very very important to ask it. So I'm very intrigued by this concept of home, right? And I think we carry it wherever we go, and we were talking about it a little bit earlier. I'm from Baltimore. I'm very much a Baltimore guy, despite what anyone may say. I'm very much a Baltimore guy, and I'm drawing the qualities of other cities that I think I see. It's like, oh, I'm here in New Orleans, and I see like Tremaine is a wire. It's the same thing. It's just the art side of it, right? Tell me about like how you carry this sort of sense of home with you wherever you may travel, like whether it's you're going to a conference, maybe in this region for sake of argument, or even when you were, back in the DMV and in DC or what have you, or maybe, before you came back. Mm-hmm. Tell me about like how you brought this concept of home with you.
Man, New Orleans is one of those cities to where when you meet someone from New Orleans, you know they're from New Orleans.
This is true.
You can tell from the way we speak. You can tell by the way we walk. You can tell by the way we enunciate words. It's going to come out, regardless of where you are. You can easily tell. We just got a different swag. There's certain cities to where their culture is so rich, it is immediately prominent in the interaction with that person.
Sure.
There's certain cities that have it, like New York has. You can always tell when someone's from New York. Certain parts of LA, they have it. Someone from LA, you can tell by the way that they say words and the words that they say, and just kind of like the way they dress and their demeanor. And New Orleans is one of those cities as well, to where you immediately like, hey, you from New Orleans. Mm-hmm. So the culture is so rich, and for me, I think I carried it with me without even knowing how much I exuded New Orleans. Yeah. Because I would be out and about in different parts of the world, and people would ask, "Are you from New Orleans?" I was like, "Yeah." They'd be like, "Oh my goodness, I absolutely love your city," And then we just have such a unique culture. Yeah. A lot of people often say we are the northernmost island. It's a very island feel. Yeah. We really only care about food, fun, and festivals. That's it, and family.
All F's.
It's all F's, and everything else we don't give a fuck about.
That's another F right there.
Yeah, so I mean that's New Orleans. It's a very laissez-faire. It's a very laissez-faire city. So, but we learn how to have fun, and we enjoy and we appreciate the little things in life. So, how I carry it is it's so ingrained in me. Mm-hmm. I feel like the energy surrounds me and exudes me, and people are able to recognize it. And for me, I have such a great affinity for home, particularly the Black culture and the Black history of New Orleans, and being one of the largest slave ports in the country, and how so much greatness and music came out of New Orleans, and the flavors that we have in our foods from all the way from New Orleans up to Detroit, Michigan, how we flavor foods, a lot of that was birthed out of New Orleans. The way jazz has inspired hip hop and R&B, and New Orleans being the birthplace of jazz, and even rock and roll. Yeah. So you look at all forms of music, and all forms of music were inspired by jazz. And having being from New Orleans, which is the birthplace of jazz, I'm always able to recognize our touch on things. So that's how I take it everywhere I go, because it is everywhere I go, versus other cities, while they have great contributions to society, it's not as prominent or pronounced as New Orleans. And then coming back home and being able to be engulfed in it just gave me a greater appreciation, and being able to walk to Treme and see Congo Square, and Treme being one of the oldest Black communities in the country, is just something that I'm super proud of. So I make sure I take that spirit with me. And speaking of our spirits, New Orleans is a very, very spiritual city. So whether you want to take that spirit with you or not, it's coming with you.
I love that. And I feel like, not being from here, what have you, and having a lot to learn about being here, but really I have a really, and I mean, it's a really soft spot for the city and the people in it, or what have you. And it's always with the people. That's a big piece of it. It feels, I love Baltimore. I'm from Baltimore boy, but it's one of those things where coming down here feels regenerative. It's just like, I needed that. It's like almost going to therapy in some ways, and I know people are going to say that doesn't make sense, but it feels that way. It truly does. As we were talking, when I got this sort of period of doing all of these interviews and all of this stuff, it's great, but I was I haven't really taken a break, and being able to step away a little bit and then go to a city that I really dig and be able to do it this time, and having work to be a part of it. It's I'm doing the thing that I enjoy doing with people that I'm very curious about, and I've only had good situations with.
Yeah, man, New Orleans, our current culture is one of the richest Black cultures in the entire world. in the entire country. It's just one of the richest cultures. So when you're traveling around the United States and you want to be engulfed and enriched in Black culture, you have to come to New Orleans. And if you want to understand the dynamics of this country, then you have to come to New Orleans. That's why James Baldwin, when he wanted to get in touch and see the realities and have a better understanding after he came back from France, he was like, man, I really want to help understand this country. He took a journey down here to New Orleans because he wanted to get in touch with his roots. His dad is from New Orleans. So he's like, I really want to get in touch with my roots and help better understand. Imani Perry, when she wrote South to America, she spent a lot of time in New Orleans because she wanted to really get in touch with Black culture and the origins of it and its roots. W.B. Du Bois spent a lot of time in New Orleans also to help understand and get enriched into the Black culture and understand the origins and the roots of the traditions. It's just one of those places to where we have the oldest and most prominent cultures and representation of Blackness in America.
And I would imagine that is part of the naming.
Yes.
So as we move into these last moments here, and thank you. This has been wonderful. I'm gonna butcher this real quick as we get into the lanyard part of this podcast. I got a few rapid fire questions I got to ask you because I'm curious. So here you go. Number one, what did you have for breakfast?
Oatmeal.
Which flavor?
Plain. I like oatmeal. I like it really dry. I put a little water in it. And I just like plain.
So you had a granola bar in a bowl, is what you say. You're like, I'm just going to eat this granola bar.
I like it real dry. I don't like it watery, man. But I predominantly, most mornings, man, I have oatmeal or like some boiled eggs for breakfast. But this morning, it was just plain oatmeal.
I had a biscuit with the sausage and egg cheese in there. They were like, do you want hot sauce on? I was like, on the side, please.
Yeah, I'll put some honey or agave in it. But it's just some honey, agave, and just plain oatmeal.
Hey. Let's see. What are 3 words that come to mind when you want to define the real culture of New Orleans? Because we have the tourist culture, we have the people who are living here, and you're very much a Black New Orleans dude. Mm-hmm. So I want to get your 3 words. What's your take?
Laissez-faire.
So you want French? Go on.
Fun.
Mm-hmm. It's another one of those F's, by the way. We're going.
To our detriment, we are complacent.
So this is the last one I got for you. So, we talked about drinks a little bit. What's your favorite drink, man? You can go either morning, afternoon, or we can go evening. What's your favorite drink?
Well, honestly, I don't consume alcohol.
Come on, man. Please take it. I'm out of here. This interview is over. Okay, what is I see you drinking tea, so I feel like it's going to be tea.
Green tea. That's my go-to. Green tea.
Okay. Hey, you're off the hot seat. You're off the cayenne seat. So I want to, again, thank you for being on this podcast. And 2, I want to invite and encourage you to shamelessly plug away. The floor is yours. Tell folks where to check out all the projects that you're working on. Noyar Bar, Baldwin and Company, any of the things that you got, social media, website. The floor is yours.
Thank you, man. I appreciate the opportunities, man. It's an honor and pleasure to be a guest on your podcast. Thank you so much. You can find more about Baldwin and Company at www.baldwinandcobooks.com. We do ship books online. You can order books online. Please shop with us versus those other big chain stores or that other big store online that starts with an A. We give back to the community. We are a community-based organization, so please make sure you shop with us. We ship directly to your doorstep just like that other company. So you can also follow us on IG at Baldwin and Company. We're on Twitter at Baldwin Books. If you want to follow Nola Artbar's journey as well, you can go to www.nolaartbar.com. And we're on IG as Nola_art_bar. We also have the Baldwin and Company Foundation, which is our 501c3. You can find links for that on the Baldwin & Co page as well. And we also have a conversation with creators where we're bringing in some of the most prominent thought leaders today. So the Imani Imani Perry and Edgar Jr., Michael Eric Dyson, Nicole Hannah Jones. These are all some of our previous guests. This Saturday coming up, we have Stephen A. Smith, who will be in the building, and then we also have Eric Thomas, who's coming. We bring in some of the most prominent thought leaders today, some of the most greatest minds that have ever graced this planet. Currently today, our contemporary geniuses that we work with, we're bringing them into New Orleans, into Baldwin and Company to help inspire creativity and growth within each other.
Thank you. And well, there you have it, folks. I want to again thank DJ Johnson, Baldwin and Company for coming onto the podcast and sharing more about his story and his journey as we continue. And I'm Rob Lee, saying that there's art, culture, community, with all caps, in and around your neck of the woods. You've just got to look for it.